Welcome back, everybody. This is your host, Primo. We are back testing cars in GTA. We're going to start moving up to some big dogs here, so I want to make sure that everybody's aware some of these cars are going to be kind of top-tier cars, but they may be limited on the way they can be used, so that's going to come up later, and that's really important. So right now, I want to introduce you to the Vigero ZX. We're going to specifically be testing the HSW model. That's the upgraded model in house that's in the street racing area. So the street meet, you can go in there and you can upgrade your vehicle to a next tier. And there's a lot of cars that come into this class that are really a lot more powerful, but usually at the expense of handling. It's a good looking car. I do like the idea of the forged carbon pieces that are going to go into this one, but on the whole, upgrading wise, it's very limited. It's just basically directed more at power. So to buy one of these, it's going to cost you $1,947,000, but to get the full power of the car, you have to upgrade to the HSW, and that's another $366,750. So all said and done, to get this car to where it needs to be, you're going to spend $2,313,750. So quite an investment to get this. It is in the muscle class. So that's the thing is even if it's an HSW car, it's going to have its own class, and for HSW that's considered tier 2. So that's something we're going to address today too, kind of let you know where that's at. And as a whole, let's just go into the car and see what it does for times. Welcome to Grapeseed Circuit. Now, Grapeseed Circuit is kind of our first testing track. It's our GT style track. So what we do here is we want to find out exactly kind of the 0 to 60 of the car and how it does laterally with the G-forces. So does it break out really easy? Now, this is in the muscle class, and typically the muscle class is a very high output, not a lot of handling class in general. It is currently dominated by a vehicle that does have a lot of traction. So in the Vigero's stock trim, it's actually fairly well handled for the power that it has. The problem is that when you throw all that HSW power on it, it is way too much power for the platform. It doesn't fix any of the handling issues with the car. So suddenly you have a car that has a ton of power and all its handling issues now come to bear. Now it does really well kind of in the lower areas. It keeps nice and center. It doesn't like want to get loose too badly on you. But yeah, once you get into a turn and you're going way too fast, the back end is not going to be resilient enough to stay where it needs to be. And once you apply power to it, it kind of makes the problem worse. It's not crazy. It's not broken handling. It really is, and it feels a lot like a vehicle that has very good center handling, so the car stays center. It doesn't want to turn from one side to the other. It doesn't delist. But the problem is that it just has way too much power for the platform the way it's set up. You kind of feel like more handling should have been put into the car to make it a little bit more stable on its surface based on how it's set up. But that's typical for most HSWs, and when it comes to the muscle class, it's almost like you get the two problems compounded on each other. So you have something that doesn't have a lot of handling with a class that really is based on having more power and not fixing any of the handling issues. So those are doubly problems here. So what you have to do is when you think about this car, is you're going to have to think about that next turn, where you're going, and try to keep it on the surface as much as you can. As long as it's on that driving surface and doing its job, it'll be a lot better off. And kind of measure where you're at to your turn before you get there. The truth is that this car is the fastest when it comes to the GT style tracks. It's actually 3 seconds faster in its HSW form than its next competition. The problem is we run into is, again, now we have a car that's an HSW, and it's only for certain type of platforms, and it's something that can be turned off. And once you turn it off, it's no longer a competitive car anymore. And that's kind of sucks for people who don't know what next game they're going into. If you like to go into on-call rooms if somebody's turned that HSW off and you get into this car, it's going to be a different kind of battle, and it really becomes very weak. So this is kind of unfortunate for this car because it is the best, but it can be kind of shot in the foot fairly quickly. And even if it's not shot in the foot and you end up in this car, you want to be a little bit aware of it. It's not as bad as some of the other cars out there that really do make you pay for driving them, and you have to drive them to be the fastest. But yeah, it can be one of those things of just be aware of the drawbacks involved in it, so that you can have the best maximum horsepower through the drive. But again, fastest at current in the muscle class when it comes to GT racing. Next up is Route 68, and if we're going to talk about Route 68, this is a fast track. It's made to test basically top speed and doesn't have to worry so much about handling. And with this car, I'm going to have to talk about it really fast. The truth is, Route 68 does pretty much everything that falls right into the hands of the Vigero ZX. It is a 0 to 60 car. It's a top speed car. I was actually amazed that it was actually this fast. It just seemed to pour on all the power and just wanted to just keep going and keep going and keep going. The HSW upgrades for this really do it gigantic favors. The only real problem is that when you hit the little center, the one little turn that's difficult in here, you do have to get off the gas a little bit. So we did lose a little bit of power, but on a whole, it beat its next available competition by 7 seconds, which is incredible in the muscle car class. Again, it's an HSW, so it's easy to defeat this car just by turning off HSW. But yeah, if you have it and you're ready to go, this car is going to be the one to choose when it comes to top speed runs. So this is going down. This was part of the Hao races, and this is made to really test the off-roading potential of the Vigero ZX. Does that HSW power really change over to off-roading potential? Now, the first thing that you really need to know is that when it comes to off-roading has a specific flag that's associated with it, and it tells cars whether they're more or less limited. That's not a big flag when it comes to the muscle car class. Not a lot of these cars are considered off-road vehicles, and the ones that kind of are not going to be ones that are competitive. So you kind of get this weird zone up top that all these cars run in together. And unfortunately, the Vigero ZX didn't really make the grade. It was about 6 seconds off, and it was I'd say probably the top 3 or 4 on testing. But even at the top areas, it was still very competitive. Now, what really plagued it the most was back to those handling problems that we had before, is really the HSW upgrades apply way too much energy to way too little handling. So you end up spending a lot of time on your brakes and not wanting to apply the gas or applying it in spurts, and that's the thing is it really ends up plaguing the car in the long run because it's very easy to make a mistake, and those mistakes can pretty much cost you the race. So it's one of those ones where there's pretty much anything more handling oriented and less power oriented works when it comes to off-road, and that's the complete polar opposite of the Vigero ZX. It's tons of power, loses a lot of handling. So that's where it hurt it, and I think that's what kind of took it down with the off-road class. But on a whole, it didn't do too bad. I don't know if I would actually take it on a competitive race or not. There are obviously better cars suited for what it's doing, but if it was the only car you had, again, and you knew that HSWs were enabled, I'd probably choose it over a lot of the other vehicles out there. So take it as you will. It is what it is, and I feel bad for it. kind of was wanting to sweep the field, but it's not going to sweep it today. Now, obviously, the Vigero ZX is a HSW car, and if it's an HSW car, it can actually compete in HSW racing. Now, it is definitely not going to be the fastest of all the HSW cars for all tiers. That is reserved currently for a motorcycle that I doubt we'll see changing anytime soon. But it does fall into the Tier 2 class. Now, if you've ever raced in that class, and you probably did when you got introduced to it, that is the class that's currently held with the Turismo. And there really is one car that has dominated the Tier 2 area and all by itself, and again, that's the Turismo. So the excitement that I had for this, especially when it came out, was I really thought it was going to have a potential to oust the Turismo, and unfortunately it came up insanely short, so that was unfortunate about it. But we're talking about 0.7 seconds, so these two cars are super competitive when it actually comes to the driving, and that was something that was kind of exciting, because even if it is a little bit slower for me and still on pretty much the exact same time, the handling of the Vigero is actually a much better, in my opinion. And I think that for the untrained person that's really getting into this, they'll get in the Vigero and do a ton better. So just practice and see which one is best for you. But for the numbers, it fell just points slower. So how does the Vigero ZX stack up? Pretty good, actually. It won 2 of its races. It's extremely fast, but not the fastest. Its handling left a lot to be desired, but it wasn't broken handling, so it's really something you can get ahead of. Looks-wise, it really kind of rides on its natural looks. There's not a lot of upgrading options that are going to be exciting, I don't think. It does have some, but it really just kind of changes the spin of how it looks. There's a lot of other cars that have a lot better options when it comes to, you know, its ability to change and, you know, show up to a car show and win a car show. So yeah, all in all, it does fairly well. Its purpose kind of is being a race car. It's kind of being fast, but really the Vigero has one big weakness, and that really is that it's an HSW car. The idea that one flag gets flipped and all of its power disappears. Right now, yeah, it's a broken car. It could compete in pretty much every kind of racing there is, even in its own class, as long as it's within the Tier 2 range. But like I said, if you take it out of its natural element and turn off those extra powers that it has, it really does fall way down the list of cars. There's a lot of cars like the DeClasse 8, for instance, that if you take it on a track that's top speed, that's going to be fast in HSW, and it's also going to be really fast if you don't pick HSW. So there's a lot of cars that kind of can do both things at the same time, and it's just kind of unfortunate that the Vigero ZX didn't kind of meet that area, that it really is, you can't go in using it blindly, and it's so far ahead of the competition that sometimes I think you just, whether you know it or not, you just have to run the risk and pick it, and that's where things get kind of crazy for that. And I think that's the unfortunate part of it, but it's just kind of, you know, the tactics and the way you play when it comes to racing in GTA right now. I think for those who really like the competition, that's enjoyable. I think for the more casual player, it can be rather frustrating, but we'll see how that spins out down the road. As we can see, the muscle class top cars have changed consistently over and over again. The HSW cars have remained fairly consistent, but that's the thing is now I just have to to buy this car versus buying, a bunch of other cars to kind of fill that void for it. And it could be a good thing. So I don't know. We'll do a little bit more testing with it. I still think the muscle car class is very tight when it comes to cars, but it is still rather broken, and that's unfortunate. It'll be good to see what it looks like down the road, but until then, we're just going to have to wait. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you a little bit later. We'll get some more testing out to you, and as always, guys, check it out later, and don't forget to like and subscribe. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you soon.